So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Dora. I am one of the organizers of Qesher. You can also find here Sebastian. We're both running this project already for more than 5 years. Qesher means connection in Hebrew, and we chose this name because we are aiming to link different Jewish communities from all over the world through learning about each other and finding out about each other, learning history, culture, and also present day situation of different Jewish communities. And I think many of you know that the book club series grew out of this initial project. And we realized that there are so many wonderful authors and wonderful books that also speak about this topic of Jewish worldwide heritage that now we are very happy to include one or two book club events into our monthly program. Today, we are very happy to welcome Ayelet Tsabari. I'm going to very briefly introduce her, and then we're going to do a short conversation with me first. So it's going to be a bit of an interview conversation about her book. And then after that, we'll open it up for everyone to ask questions. So Ayelet Tsabari is the award-winning author of Songs for the Brokenhearted, which is the book that we're going to discuss today. But she's also the author of The Art of Leaving and The Best Place on Earth. Her work has earned the National Jewish Book Award, the Semi Rohr Prize, and many others, and has been recognized by the New York Times, Globe and Mail, Apple Books, and Kirkus Reviews. She's also the co-editor of Tongues on Longing and Belonging Through Language and teaches creative writing at King's College and the University of Gulf. So we're very happy to have Ayelet here with us. So before we jump into the book, which was really, for me, was a really an amazing experience to read it. But first of all, I would like to ask you to also introduce a bit yourself and share with us a little bit about your background and how that led you to write this book.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me, Dora and Sebastian. And thank you all for coming here to hear me talk about the book. And I'm really looking forward to your questions. So, yeah, I was born and raised in Israel to a family of Yemeni descent, a large family. Both my parents, both my parents are born in Israel, but both sets of grandparents came from Yemen in the 30s. And I just grew up with like kind of my entire childhood was steeped in that experience of Yemeni Jewish, in the Yemeni Jewish community, in the foods and the culture. That said, I wouldn't say I was that interested in it. I think one of the ways in which when you grow up in Israel, the way to become to belong is to just not really, be at that point in your life. You don't want to be engaging with that past. So it's something that I came to later on. And once I started writing in English, I became aware of how little of my heritage I've ever read in books. You know what I mean? Like not just in English, but in Hebrew as well. It was just like there was a big, really big lack of Yemeni characters in stories and books that I read growing up, in books that I was assigned in school. So needless to say, there was almost none in English literature, in English language literature. So yeah, like I feel like I always say it very dramatically, but it's true. I kind of I really wanted to just write this big, you know, Jewish Yemeni novel. That was my goal. I wanted that, saga that goes, beyond one generation, just like a multi-generational thing. Like I really wanted that kind of novel that I've read and loved from other cultures and other countries in the world. And I'm like, we deserve something like that too, you know, and we can have that. There's so much richness, and there's so many stories, and such a wealth of it. So that was the big kind of why of the novel. You know what I mean? Like that was the this lofty goal that I had in mind. Um, so to yeah, so to rectify the experience that I had as a child, to create all those characters that were missing from my childhood and from the books that I've later read in English as well, to kind of broaden the Jewish story, in a way, and to honor my family and my community, to celebrate my community, and especially the women. Yeah.
I think you really did that beautifully. And one of the things that I really enjoyed in your book is how we kind of journey together with Zohara, who is the main character, and how, like, in the beginning, she seems not, I wouldn't say unaware, but like she's just very Israeli. Like she has this Israeliness, which, could be any Israeli, and she has this quality of not really, we don't really know, of which background. Just an Israeli
Mm-hmm.
young woman studying, intellectual, very smart, very, I think it's very easy to relate to her. And I
Mm.
think it's very interesting her journey throughout the book, how she becomes kind of a Yemenite Israeli. And I was just wondering like how much that was inspired by your own story or how much you see today Yemenite Israelis going through that journey.
Yeah, it's obviously this is not an autobiographical novel, you know. It has autobiographic elements, like I think any fiction writer that in their work. But definitely, there's that experience is something that I've experienced in a different. It was a different journey, but it was the same kind of quality of of just sort of distancing oneself and then wanting to reclaim it and wanting to embrace that. And I think I talk about this in my memoir, right? Like in my of my own journey and my own story, of at first pushing it away and then wanting to embrace it and celebrate it and own it in a new way. So yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, this is something that I feel like, and in many ways, like I would say that the distancing, but also some of the another way that I very much relate to Zohara, or kind of modeled her a little bit on my own experiences. I think it's some of the maybe the judgment that Zohara has to toward her her community, or feeling like the women in the community were sheltered, closed-minded, naive. Like she thinks of her mom and her life was small, like and feeling herself more evolved and more worldly, and so on, and not really appreciating their wisdom and their strength. And I think this is something that I can see, maybe not specifically toward my own mom or my aunts, which I thought they were badasses. But generally about the women in the community, I think this is something that I also could relate to, and was important for me to write about and to evoke that kind of journey that she went on.
Yeah, and I think it's in the acknowledgments you write about your research, like how you went to different families' homes and you found like a woman's singing group, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly, that you actually
yeah.
like there and you learned about Yemeni song and Yemeni poetry and what that gives to them and what that gives to the soul. And I was just curious if you could tell us a bit about this research that you did for the book.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this book was very heavily researched. Um, and I think the songs was like I've been researching Yemeni culture and Yemeni Jewish history um, for a long time now. I would say maybe like 15 years or more even. It was more than like researching for a specific project. It was kind of just like researching for this stuff that inspires my work in general. You know what I mean? Like, so I started just doing general research, and then I looked specifically into the northern Yemeni culture. When I realized it was a bit different, I wanted to understand how it was rural. We were like from a rural area, and it was yeah, it was different than say Sana'a, which was the capital, and that was interesting to me. And then I took time to look at the missing children, and then I looked time to look at just kind of different elements that I was embarking on one at a time. And the songs was that discovering the women's songs. And I say discovering, even though obviously I was surrounded by it my entire life. I just didn't understand the tradition. I just, they sang, we sang. It was just always there, but I didn't get the tradition, the characteristics of it, the history of it, and so on. And I think it was 2014. I got a grant from Canada, from Ontario Arts Council. It was called the Chalmers Grant, and it was to go and just interview women and do this like, I went on 2 different trips from Canada, where I was living at the time, to Israel. And I spent time at Jewish Yemeni villages and neighborhoods and just talk to women specifically. And often they sang. And after some time, I met it was all through like word of mouth. I ended up meeting my teacher, Gila Bishari. She's an amazing singer who should get a lot more success and praise than what she actually gets. Are you okay? Yeah.
I think someone unmuted for a second, but go
Okay.
ahead.
Um, and she told me about the tradition. She explained to me that the women's songs was this rich tradition that was feminine only and different than the men's songs. And I, like Zohara, didn't really understand the intricacies of it. I just thought like some songs were in Hebrew, some songs were in Yemeni Arabic. No, the men's songs were in Hebrew. The women's songs, were in Arabic because the women did not know Hebrew. They did not pray, so they didn't speak the language. And once I figured out the songs, I was kind of like, there was like this light bulb, over my head. I was like, oh, I think it sort of helped me reconcile something that I couldn't do before. Because on one hand, I look at these women of my family and they're so bold and strong and loud. And like I said, like badasses. But on the other hand, I know that in this culture, the women were unheard and silenced and marginalized and married off very young. Their lives were really hard, and they were always, walking behind the men and had to be subjected to their authority. So something didn't make sense in what I saw in front of my eyes and what I learned about, the culture and how women were treated in the culture. And the songs were the answer, because through the songs, they spoke their mind. Through the songs, they told their story, they owned their story, they reclaimed their narrative. That was their way, by writing about their heartaches and their betrayals and their pain and their sorrows and jealousy and losses. And it was just, there was so much emotion in it. And it blew my mind. Of course it would too, because I'm a writer, and this is like, I know it's an oral tradition, but it's still a tradition of song writing, of storytelling, like it appealed to me, and on more than one level. It appealed to the woman in me, to the feminist in me, to the writer in me. It really, everything clicked at that point when I started learning the songs. And then, of course, I realized it wasn't enough for me to learn about the songs. I had to learn to sing and to be a part of this tradition. And that's what I did. And that completely opened a whole new level of engagement and connection to the women and to the tradition and to the book.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very noticeable, and it's really, really engaging how you write about women's song, because it's something, it's from a Western point of view, it's really unheard of. And actually, that's what I want to ask you next. So I think so in this book, there's a lot of soul searching, I think, and that's one of the beauties of it, that you really like travel together with the characters, and you really learn together with them so much new information. And other than just the soul searching, you also share a lot of important aspects of Israeli society and Israeli history. And my first question now about that is focuses on the first storyline, which is from the 50s, that you share about the Ma'abarot and like the camps where Yemeni Jews arrived in Israel, and all the hardships that they have to go through, and the relationships between the people we follow there. And I wanted to ask, well, first of all, whatever you want to share about this storyline here with us, that without too many spoilers. I'd love to hear like why you included this specific part, but also I wanted to ask you, like, how much do you think these stories and this beginning of the Yemeni Jews in Israel is known by Yemeni Jews or non-Yemenite Israelis or other
Mm-hmm.
people?
Yeah, I think one of the things, like this, the book speaks about. I see it as a book about voice, a book about voicelessness, um, a book about silencing. And one of the things that I found interesting about Yemeni Jews in Israel is that idea that they are quiet. They're quiet people. Everyone always says, "Oh, they're so quiet." Again, didn't really sit with what I knew of my family. On one hand, everyone loves to hear them sing. But on the other hand, their stories were not really heard. And partially, it's because they didn't really talk. There's a poem, sorry, by Aharon Almog, who's a Yemeni poet, and it's called "On the Silence of the Yemenites." It's a song in Hebrew. They didn't really talk, and when you asked, and it's something I talk about in the book too, like how, Zohara says, Zohara and her sister speak about how their mom didn't really tell stories. She didn't really talk. And I've experienced that with my grandmother, for example, too. It was just like, oh, there's nothing to tell. My life, there's nothing to tell. I remember reading an actual academic paper titled that, My Life, There's Nothing to Tell. I think the name of the academic was Sigal Ron, and she interviewed Mizrahi women. And that was the general kind of, so maybe it's not even just Yemenites, right? Like that was the general feel from it. So I would say that I didn't know a lot about that time because for some reason or another, they didn't really want to talk about it. They didn't want to talk about it because it hurt too much. They didn't want to talk about it because they felt like their stories didn't matter. They just wanted to move forward. I'm not sure what it is, but but by the way, when I started interviewing women for that research project that I went on in 2014, there were some women that agreed and wanted to, and suddenly were just like, you know, so happy for the chance. But sometimes some there were those kind of like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter. Oh, like, why are you asking? Who cares? Kind of attitude. Um, but asking why it was important. I guess I was interested in the beginning. I was interested in kind of just I'm interested in the beginning of Israel. Um, it's like this major thing happened, and all this, it's a story we all know, but we know it from different angles. And all these Jews came from so many places, and many of them ended up in the Ma'abarot. And then I started watching those movies about the Ma'abarot. There's one called Ma'abarot. I highly recommend it. Um, and it just, again, like I was so immersed in the story of that time. It's just like it has the making of it's an epic, it's just like, all of them coming and living in tents together, uh, very different cultures, like, and miraculously, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Um, yeah, I was just fascinated. I was fascinated by that time. And it starts in the 50s, but the other timeline is in the 90s, and that's also a hugely important time in the history of this region. That's the times of Oslo, when it felt like something was going to be, you know, something was going to remedy some of the maybe mistakes or that happened in 48, and then that came crashing down with the assassination of Rabin. So yeah, two like really turbulent, hopeful uh times, times of both, like, you know just magic and hope and tragedy. Really, really major times. And then it came out in another major time, and that was not planned. um yeah.
Yeah. Do you
I
see
mean, the
now a
actual book, like the actual
connection?
publication, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, that
yeah.
is, yeah, now with after October
Oh,
7th. And
absolutely.
do you see like a connection between the
Yeah,
three
absolutely.
eras?
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. It feels like, like those dots on the timeline, like the really major plot points in this story that is this country and this region, for sure.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think the other timeline, I mean, they're very connected, obviously the two, and it's beautiful how they kind of, you read them side by side, and the more you find out about the beginnings, the more you find out how that influences the later times. And I found it very interesting how, I guess it's not too much of a spoiler because that's how the whole book starts, that Zohara loses her mother and comes back to Israel and suddenly reunites with her family, and how the different people in the family process this grief in these turbulent times that you just spoke about. And I find it very interesting that they go in very different directions, the different characters in the family. And I was just wondering if you'd want to address that a little bit, how these journeys, what they mean to you, what they mean to your characters, meaning Zohara, her sister,
Yep.
her nephew. I don't want to give too
Mm.
many spoilers, but I'll leave that to you how to.
Yeah. Um, yeah, like, so family dynamics are just fascinating to me. Sisters relationships are fascinating to me. Mother daughters. I mean, again, it's a book about women. It's a book about mothers and daughters. It's a book about sisters, but it's also a book about grief, absolutely, and loss, and the way that we, um, I guess, deal with it in different ways. People deal with it in different ways. That's kind of what I was trying to show, in the way that those different characters react to the loss of this matriarch, and they have different relationships, with Saida, Zohara's mom, who, like you said, the book starts with her death. Um, and Yoni, who's so the book is divided into three. I see some of you have read it, but there are three main voices. And Yoni, the younger, the grandchild, who is Zohara's nephew, he deals with it in a way that, um, that was kind of, it was well, he was well suited for me to, kind of explore some of the tensions that were going on in Israel in the 90s around the Oslo, peace talks. Again, such a time of turmoil and such a time of hope. And I was always interested because I've read some stories of people looking back at that time and talking about how they found themselves, in protest and being radicalized. And I find it interesting how young men in particular, I would say, can find themselves in those situations. Uh, Young, good men, like good-hearted, can find themselves in violent, radicalized situations. And that was, for me, like that was, Yoni was perfect, way to sort of explore that, as he deals with the grief of losing, the person who his grandmother, who was the closest person in his life. Yeah.
And I think it's important to mention that also there's in all these stories there is a bit of love story as well. And
Yeah.
they're also so different. Like you show so many faces of love, like how love can be manifested, both in between women and women, like inside the family, but also like romantic love, and some are platonic and some are can be realized. And I saw that that was also a major theme in your book. So
Yeah.
if you want to also comment on that.
Yeah, I really like what you say there here, because when I was thinking about it, I always talk about it having like there's two major love stories. There's this love story for the ages that takes place in the Ma'abara between Saida and her, and Yaqub was the third voice in the book, and that was really challenging and fun to write. That was also something. I'm a romantic at heart. I'm not afraid of major love stories. I'm not afraid of, emotions, and I'm not afraid of, you know, perhaps being called sentimental by certain people. I have a lot to say about sentimentalism. I need to write an essay about it. And who is called sentimental, and why are we so scared of feeling, and sometimes in North American culture, I think. But so yeah, I knew I wanted this big love story, that takes place in the Ma'abara, and I have that, but also, Zohara has her own love story that I am not going to talk about, because there's like a kind of, until the very end, I'm not sure. I hope that it's not really clear which way she's going to go with it. But like you say, I love what you said, because there's lots of love in the book that is, the love of that relationship with the grandchild and the grandma was very special and unique. And I loved writing that, and the sisters, and there's friendships there that are lots of physical love between women, like that are just, yeah, I loved writing all of those uh, mini love stories as well in it. I don't think I don't think anybody ever asked me about that. I love that. Yeah.
Great. And back to a bit about, how Yemenite Israelis experience their Yemenite heritage. I had the feeling like how when you speak about the origins and how the original immigrants to Israel, they didn't really want to, on the one hand, they wanted to pass on their culture. On the other hand, they really wanted to make sure that their children blend into society. Like Zohara has to go to this Ashkenazi school and study, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and then there's this whole process of a bit going against that and reclaiming the Mizrahi heritage. And I was just wondering, like you mentioned that you didn't have as a child many books or literature that would speak about Yemenite people or Yemenite women or Mizrahi culture in general. Do you
Hmm.
think that is changing now? Do you think there are many
Mm,
people who are kind of reclaiming this heritage or being proud of
yeah.
it? Or is there a shift in attitudes in this?
Yeah, things are changing. Things are changing for the better for sure. Um, it's still a work in progress, like it takes these kind of shifts take time. Um, I think it's I think my parents' generation, especially the ones that were already born in Israel, really tried to, kind of push away, and that's why, give their children that kind of life and, just be Israeli and not talk about the past and all of this. And then I think my generation is more reclaiming and more looking back and wanting to know and wanting to hear the stories and wanting to learn the recipes and wanting to learn the music and wanting to learn the language sometimes even. And you can see that across the board in Ashkenazi and Mizrahi, all of it. Yeah, there's more of a movement to kind of wanting to connect with our heritage, with the past. Um, as far as literature, it's still not great. There are a lot more Mizrahi poets nowadays. Uh, Prose is still it's still lacking in Israel. Um, yeah, I would like to see so much more. Um, yeah, yeah,
And so before we get into the audience questions, I will close with one last question. You mentioned that, I mean, we know that you wrote this book in English, and then
yes.
you mentioned in our conversation when we spoke that you are working on translating it to Hebrew. So I wanted to ask, how is that going? Is it
Oh God.
how is it to translate your own work? Is it
Uh, it's so
or
hard. It's so hard. Yeah,
but
it's
you
really,
don't want
really
to give
difficult.
it to another person to do it.
I don't know, I feel like I'm already in it and I feel committed to it. I can enjoy it too. It's like I realized a few things about the act of translation, especially I think your own kind of rewriting on your own translation, your work of your own work, that there's two levels to it. The first level is very kind of um, craft, work. It's like you put the words into another language, right? And then you have the art part where you make it beautiful. And I can, because it's my own work, I can really play with it at that point. So I'm still at the first part. I would like to finish that part so I can put away the English, just be done with it, and have the entire text in Hebrew. And then once the entire text is in Hebrew, I feel like it's probably going to be more fun, because then it's going to be like just just put aside the English part. It's harder than I thought, but I'm in it already, and I'm committed. I really I want it to work. I want it to be good.
Especially because you mentioned
So
that
yeah,
there is prose lacking in Hebrew about
yeah,
this. So
yeah, yeah, exactly. It feels important. With my first book, I let someone else translate it, and then I went, through the translation and made all those changes and everything. And I did a lot of changes, but I just feel like I want to challenge myself and do it myself this time. Yeah.
okay. And then just a last question related to this that I mean, this is not related to Songs for the Brokenhearted, but that you also edited an anthology about how language changes you. So I'm just curious if you want to share now that you are translating your own book into Hebrew, if you want
Wow.
to share just a few words about this anthology as well.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of this anthology. It's called Tongues, and I edited it with two friends of mine, and we wanted to kind of explore it. It's written by people who generally speak and write often in more than one language. And it's just stories of, like you said, like of existing in more than one language, existing in between languages, reclaiming languages. Um, and I chose to write the essay in this anthology not about writing in English, which is something I've written about before, but about actually sort of longing for Arabic, for the language of my ancestors that I feel like I kind of was denied in a sense. And I lament that. I still do, not to mention it's the language of my neighbors and the language that surrounds me here. And it's such a shame that I don't speak it. But yeah, I feel like I keep writing about language. Now I want to write something about this experience of the translation, of the rewriting, because it's such a unique experience. Like I can't tell you how many times, like I'm like I put it today I put a word in translation to because I was doing the work, and I was, oh, that's what that means. I don't think I understood it when I was writing it in English. So I was actually evoking that image. That's not what I wanted. No, I'm gonna now write it differently in Hebrew. Or, there's a scene and she's putting some fruit on the table. I'm like, what? Why did she put that fruit? That's like really hard to get in the summer. I'm gonna change that. She's gonna get grapes instead. And like it's like such a it's such a crazy experience, that I don't think it's like anything um at all. So I feel like I need to write about it, but later. First, I need to actually finish the work.
And
Yeah,
I just thought that it's worth mentioning because it's such a relevant topic for Jews around the world because I think so many Jews, in different places live with multiple languages. And
absolutely.
yeah, I
Yeah,
just thought that was
absolutely.
interesting to
Yeah.
mention as well. But I see that there are many questions, so I'll turn to the questions from the audience. Sebastian, if you want to also help me collect, I'll start with the first few that were
I, I send you
collected.
some. I send
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I'll start with those, and if you can help me also collect more, then that would be wonderful. So the first question was, when will the book be available in paperback, and is there a book group guide with discussion questions, and are you open to doing book group sessions?
Yeah, there is a book club kit, and you can find it on my website on the page for dedicated to the book. It's right on the top. It will say download well, right under the description of the book, it would say download the book club kit, but you can also just do Songs for the Brokenhearted book club kit on Google. You should be able to find it. It has questions, it has recipes and playlist. Um, some words for me. So yeah, that's and I am open to book clubs. You can write to me through my website if you like. I think there's going to be I don't remember when the paperback is coming out. Um, yeah, I'm sorry, but it's
Okay.
yeah,
Well, anyway, tomorrow we'll send the links to Ayelet's
uh,
website and links where you can find the book, and you can follow there. So the next question is more about society. How much distance and prejudice still exists between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi communities in Israel?
mm,
And what about the prejudice within the Mizrahi communities that came
oh
out
yeah,
other countries such as Iran, Iraq, Syria,
yeah, oh
etc.?
yeah, absolutely. There's that absolutely. Um, it's complicated. A lot of people would like to tell you, oh, it's nothing now. We're all mixed now. Um, Unfortunately, I don't think that's true. For many reasons. First of all, sure, there's a lot of mixed children nowadays, and yet your last name still says something, and your physical appearance still says something. And I can see that even within my own family, like we are all almost, I think every single one of my siblings is mixed and, married someone who's not Yemeni. And it's interesting to me to see the experiences their children have, depending on their appearance, their last names, and so on. So it's interesting. Um, the other sad thing about it is that those kind of some people weaponize it for political gain, and that's very unfortunate. Um, so you can see a lot of, like the Mizrahi communities are considered generally more right-leaning. The Ashkenazis are considered more left-leaning. Of course, it's not always the case, and I talk about it in the book as well. Those kind of tensions that exist. So there are certain politicians that would make use of that in a way that is abhorrent. And because we're trying to bring people together, not push them apart. But sadly, that is a real thing. And yes, there's definitely prejudice also within Mizrahi communities. And I remember the first time that I discovered that, because I was under the impression that all Mizrahi, of course, were very different. And I knew that, I always knew that. And I knew that Mizrahi is a made up, but also Ashkenazi is made up. Ashkenazi are very different within there's different kinds. Um, but I remember talking to an Iraqi friend one day when I was in my early 20s, and suddenly it dawned on me. I don't remember what he was saying, what he was expressing. And I was like, wait a second. So I've always thought we're all kind of in it together, but you actually think we're savages. And he's like, oh yeah, totally. Like, I had no idea. I was like, yeah, well, Yemenis came like with no they did not they ate with their hands, they had no education, they walked barefoot. Iraqis came from, not all of them, but some of them were highly educated, came from Baghdad, spoke several languages, had degrees in the University of Baghdad. It was like, it's very different, very, very different. But I did not know that. And I think that's also like being treated the same when they came into Israel. That was another thing that like was difficult for a lot of these people. Like just being treated as one thing, when they felt like they had nothing in common except for maybe speaking a dialect of Arabic, different dialects. Yeah, so it does exist, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Question from Regina. What about the Yemeni babies who disappeared? You
Mm.
address this in your book as well. I don't know how much you want to get into it now, how much you want to share about this.
Okay, what is the question?
I think just if you could, that it was not mentioned until now, and if you want to say anything about this part of the book.
Yeah, it's such an epic story that I feel like I can't just touch on it. Like it's yeah, you can't do it on one leg, as they say in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is a part of the book. And it's an unresolved um, tragedy that feels like it might never be resolved. And it's something that kind of haunts. It happens to more than just the Yemenis. It happens to that's why it's called the Yemeni and Mizrahi and Balkan missing children. But it does feel like something that haunts the community for sure. And I think that's what I try to evoke in the book without it being the story. I just wanted it to haunt the story the way that it haunts so many families in the Yemeni community in Israel.
Yeah, and I think that's also part of the reason why I didn't even mention it because I think it's so powerful in the book, and there are many other topics in the book that are very powerful that I didn't want to bring in intentionally, and I think it's good to leave a few things out. So, I just really recommend for everyone to read it and 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 you can you will find out a lot about all these themes. So the next question is that even without Hebrew translation, what has the reaction been in Israel or among Israelis who read in English?
Um, it's kind of an interesting experience for me in Israel because and maybe that's partially why I want to do this and kind of uh, write the book in Hebrew and have a little bit more of a presence in Israel now that I live here too. Before I lived in Canada, so um, in a sense, I don't know how I'm feel like I'm not as known in Israel maybe uh, as I am outside of it. That's my sense. So I don't know if I can comment on a reception in Israel because it's been very few and far between. I get obviously, some nice comments from people. My first book was published in Israel and did fairly well in Hebrew. But yeah, generally it's like um, most of my readership until now has been outside of Israel.
And actually, there
And
was
I
a
think
question about this, that why did you decide to write it in English in the first place?
so. I lived in Canada for 20 years, and I started writing in English while living in Canada. And I can't say this was something that I decided to do. It was more just something that kind of um, happened. And again, another thing I can absolutely not start talking about.
Okay, I think we lost Ayelet for a moment. Let's hope she comes back. In the meantime, while we wait for Ayelet to come back, or am I also? I hope she's not just frozen for me, so you can let me know.
Yeah, no, she's frozen.
Frozen. Okay, so I just want to let everyone know who was asking maybe about, I saw that someone asked about the book Tongues, and we'll in tomorrow's follow-up email, we will send out all Ayelet's website and all the links for her books, so you will have the chance to find them and order them if you wish. Let's see. I see that Ayelet is in the meeting, but I just don't.
I
Ayelet?
don't know what happened.
Okay, here you are. So yeah, we lost
Yeah.
you for a little bit. I think we lost you when you were saying that it just happened that you wrote it in English. That was the last thing we heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I said it's just, it felt like English was making itself known in my writing. Because I was living in English and it kind of started seeping into my work. Um,
Which is what happens when you live with
yeah,
multiple languages. Yeah. The next question.
exactly. Yeah.
The next question is there a scene that you wanted to write that you couldn't get in? And if so, does it relate to something historical? Is it particularly related to the family in your novel? Was there a scene
Hmm.
that you felt like you wanted, but then at the end you left it out?
Oh, I left a ton of scenes out. I can just say one thing that I had to leave out. I wrote about, oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yes,
Okay. I don't know
I
what's
can hear
going
you.
on. I'm sorry. Um, I wanted to write about the Black Panthers, the Israeli Black Panthers. And I wrote an entire scene that I loved about a protest. Um, and I had to take it out. It was just too much. It was just too much, and I couldn't possibly include everything. But I did a lot of research into the Israeli, the Mizrahi Black Panthers, and I find them fascinating. But maybe I can make a short story out of it or something.
Mm, great, thank you. And I realized that
Yeah.
you were going to read from the book, and we didn't make time for that. And we have 5 more minutes. So I thought, would you like to read a little passage from? Did you
I
have
would, but
anything planned?
I worry that I have I worry about the connection. I'm like, can you hear me like steadily? Like I worry about reading and being like all broken.
At the moment, we can hear you. Let's hope it stays that way.
All right, so should I maybe just read from the beginning a little bit?
Okay, I
Yeah.
think that would be great.
All right, so I'm going to read from the very beginning. It's the part of Yaqub, and it says this: Immigration Camp, Machane Olim, Rosh Ha'ayin, 1950. Years later, when they are old, sitting on a porch somewhere overlooking the sea, someone would ask them how it all started, and he'd say, as soon as he saw her on the other side of the drinking fountain at the immigration camp, he knew. The air smelled of citrus, a sweet, tangy scent Yaqub had until then associated with Israel, because when they got off the planes, it flooded his nostrils. But from that moment on, it was her it evoked. He was washing his hands before dinner. She was scrubbing dishes, using sand in lieu of dish soap, her face round and open, her eyes long lashed and lined with kohol. She was dressed in a buttoned floral dress and a red cardigan. In the camp, they were all given winter clothes that looked nothing like the traditional clothing they had left behind in Yemen. Shoes, too, which they slipped onto their calloused, untrained feet. Feet accustomed to cracked earth and soft sand and rugged rocks. They looked up at the same time and their eyes met, and it was as though his heart stopped, or he was struck by lightning, or some other terrible cliche he'd feel embarrassed by as soon as it crossed his lips. He tried to rewrite it and failed because, of course, rewriting only works on paper. Still, he'd do his best. He'd gaze up at the sky, eyes squinted in concentration to the delight of his listeners on the porch, and he'd say it was like everyone else vanished from the camp, and all the other smells that permeated the air, sewage and sweat and mildew and rotten garbage, evaporated. And all that was left was the scent of oranges and the two of them looking at each other over a two-sided rusty water fountain. She blushed and looked away. Someone behind Yaqub nudged him, urging him to stop hugging the tap, and he walked away from her gaze and her smile. When he looked back, so did she. No, I didn't, Saida would argue. I would never. But this is how he remembered it. And I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. This was lovely to also hear a bit from the book. So we're at the end of our time. I hope most of the questions were answered, and if they haven't been, then just really read the book, and I'm sure that you will find so many answers. I see that someone commented that they're listening to the audiobook and that it's great. So there's, if you want to say just a couple of
Aw,
things about the
thank you.
audiobook or about the
Um,
voices.
Yeah, so I am the voice of Zohara. Yossi Tsabari is doing Yaqub, and he's wonderful. And Asaf Cohen, all of them are Yemeni. All of them, we are all Yemeni. We're all able to do the accent and the words. And that was really important to me. I'm really happy with the results. So yeah, that's try it if you like audiobooks.
Great. Thank you so much, Ayelet. Thank you for sharing about your book with us and about your story. And we hope to invite you back on Qesher to share more about the Yemeni Jewish culture. And thank you everyone for being here today. Tomorrow we'll send out the recording of this talk, and we'll also send out the links to buy the books and the different books of Ayelet and her website. So thank you very much for joining and for asking so many questions and being interested. We really appreciate your presence and your being here and your curiosity. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ayelet.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Dora and Sebastian.
Thank you very much. And we wish you all a wonderful rest of the day and good night in Israel, definitely, and in Europe as well. So have a wonderful rest of the day and week. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.